The dying man had one final wish: to see the gorilla he'd raised 40 years ago. When they wheeled him to the habitat, what the gorilla did left everyone watching in tears. Before you watch, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss another touching story like this one, and write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Robert Chen's hand trembled as he reached for the call button. The nurse appeared within seconds. "Mr. Chen? My daughter. I need Sarah, now." The pain in his abdomen had been building all morning, but that wasn't what made him press the button. He'd felt something shift, a certainty. He was running out of time. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, breathless. "Dad, what's wrong?" "I need to see Binti," Robert said. "One last time." Sarah froze. "The gorilla?" "I'm dying," he said quietly, "and I need to say goodbye." Sarah sank into the chair beside his bed, trying to process what he was asking. Her father had been a primate keeper at the San Diego Wildlife Sanctuary for 35 years before retiring a decade ago. In that time, he'd worked with dozens of gorillas, but Binti had always been special. Robert reached for the photograph on his bedside table, faded and worn from years of handling. A young man at 28 kneeling beside a tiny gorilla infant, both looking at the camera with cautious hope. "That was the first day," he said, his voice soft with memory. "The day they brought Binti to the sanctuary. She was barely 10 pounds. Her mother had been killed by poachers." He stared at the photo, his eyes distant. "She wouldn't let anyone touch her at first, screamed and fought. But I just sat with her every day. For 3 months I just sat outside her enclosure and talked to her. And then one day she reached through the bars." Sarah finished softly, knowing the story by heart. Robert nodded. "Reached through and touched my hand, just for a second, but that was it. That was when I knew she'd be okay." The smile faded as a cough racked his body. Sarah helped him sit up slightly, waiting until the spasm passed. The diagnosis had come 6 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors had given him a year, maybe less. Now, at 68 years old, Robert Chen was in his final weeks. "Dad," Sarah said carefully, "you haven't been to the sanctuary in 10 years. You're too weak to—" "I raised her," Robert interrupted, his voice suddenly firm despite its weakness. 40 years ago, they brought me a traumatized infant who'd watched her mother die, and I taught her to trust again. I taught her to love." His voice broke. "And then I retired and I just left. I thought it would be easier for her. But I can't leave this world without saying goodbye. I can't die knowing the last time she saw me I just disappeared." Tears ran down his cheeks. "Please," he whispered, "it's all I'm asking for, just one more time." Sarah made the call that afternoon. She expected resistance. Insurance liability, protocol violations, the risk of upsetting Binti after 10 years. She'd prepared arguments, explanations, even considered offering to sign waivers. But the sanctuary director, Dr. Patricia Martinez, didn't hesitate. "Of course," Dr. Martinez said immediately, her voice thick with emotion. "Robert Chen is a legend here. Half our gorilla care protocols came from his work. If he wants to see Binti, we'll make it happen. I'll arrange everything personally." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, surprised to find herself crying. "He doesn't have much time." "I know," Dr. Martinez said gently. "We'll be ready tomorrow." 3 days later, they transported Robert to the sanctuary in a medical van equipped with everything needed to keep him stable during the journey. He'd declined rapidly in those 3 days, barely eating, sleeping most hours. But when Sarah suggested postponing, his eyes had flashed with something like fear. "No," he'd said firmly. "It has to be now." Sarah wheeled him through the sanctuary's main building in a specialized wheelchair, an oxygen tank attached to the back, a thin tube running to his nose. He looked so small now, so frail. But his eyes were alert, scanning every familiar corridor, every photograph on the walls. "Nothing's changed," he murmured. "It's all exactly the same." Dr. Martinez met them at the entrance to the gorilla habitat's observation area. "Robert," she said warmly, taking his hand. "It's good to see you again." "Patricia," Robert managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for this." "Binti's inside," Dr. Martinez said. "We haven't told her you're coming. We wanted it to be natural." They wheeled Robert to the large viewing window that looked into the main habitat. Beyond the glass, the space was lush with vegetation, climbing structures, and several gorillas moving about their afternoon routines. "There," Dr. Martinez said, pointing. "That's Binti." Robert's gaze followed her finger to where a large, female gorilla sat near the far wall, grooming a younger female. Even at 40, Binti was magnificent, her silver-streaked back catching the afternoon light, her movements deliberate and graceful. "She's beautiful," Robert breathed. "She's the matriarch now," Dr. Martinez said. "Respected by everyone, gentle with the young ones, everything she learned from you." Tears ran down Robert's face. "Can we get closer?" he asked. "To the glass?" Dr. Martinez nodded. Together, she and Sarah maneuvered the wheelchair right up to the viewing window. Robert placed his hand against the glass, his palm flat against the cool surface. "Binti," he called out, his voice weak but clear. Inside the habitat, Binti's head came up immediately. Her ears pricked forward, and she turned toward the sound, confusion crossing her face. She looked around the habitat first, as if expecting to find the source of that familiar voice inside with her. When she didn't, her eyes moved to the observation windows. Her gaze swept past Robert once, twice, then stopped. Her entire body went rigid. For a long moment, nothing happened. Binti sat perfectly still, staring, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then she stood up, slowly, deliberately. "Oh my God," Dr. Martinez whispered. "She recognizes him." Binti crossed the habitat in long strides, moving with surprising speed. She didn't stop until she was right at the glass, directly in front of Robert's wheelchair. She pressed her entire body against the barrier, her face, her chest, her hands all flat against the glass. Robert pressed his hand to match hers, the glass the only thing separating their palms. "Hi, sweet girl," Robert said, his voice breaking. "Hi, Binti, it's me." Binti made a sound, a low, rumbling vocalization that Sarah had never heard before. "That's her greeting call," Dr. Martinez said quietly. "The one she used to make when Robert would arrive each morning. She hasn't made that sound in years." Binti's eyes never left Robert's face. She moved her head slightly, pressing her forehead against the glass exactly where Robert's forehead would be if the barrier weren't there. Robert leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the glass. "I've missed you," he whispered. "Every single day I've missed you." Binti's mouth opened slightly and she made another sound, softer this time, almost like a whimper. "She's crying," Sarah said, stunned. Dr. Martinez nodded, her own eyes wet. "That's grief, that's emotion." Robert's hand trembled against the glass. "I'm sorry I haven't visited. I'm sorry I stayed away so long. I thought it would be easier for you if I just let you move on." Binti's hand moved, sliding along the glass to cover Robert's completely. "But I couldn't leave without saying goodbye," Robert continued. "I couldn't go without letting you know how much you meant to me." The other gorillas in the habitat had noticed now. They approached slowly, cautiously, forming a respectful semicircle behind Binti. A young male started to come closer, but an older female, one of Binti's daughters, gently blocked him with her arm. She shook her head once, a clear gesture. "Not now, this is hers." The young gorillas sat down where they were, watching in silence. Even the infants, normally rambunctious and playful, stayed quiet. as if they sensed the weight of the moment. Dr. Martinez whispered to Sarah, "I've never seen them behave like this. They know something important is happening. They're honoring it." None of the gorillas came too close. They understood this moment belonged to Binti and the man beyond the glass. Robert and Binti sat like that for almost 2 hours. Robert talked, his voice growing weaker as time passed. He told her about Sarah's children, "your grandchildren," he called them, and Binti's ears pricked at the familiar phrase. He described the garden he'd planted in retirement, how the tomatoes reminded him of the ones they used to share when she was young. "Remember how you'd steal them right off my lunch plate?" he said, laughing softly even as tears ran down his face. "You'd look so guilty, but you'd eat them anyway." Binti made a soft huffing sound, the same sound she'd made 40 years ago when caught doing something she shouldn't. Robert's breath caught. "You remember. You still remember." He told her about the sunsets he'd watched from his porch, how every orange and pink sky made him think of her, how he'd wondered if she could see the same sunset from her habitat, how he'd hoped she was happy. And Binti listened, her eyes never leaving his face, her hand pressed to the glass. Occasionally, she'd vocalize, soft sounds that seemed to say, "I remember, I know, I understand." Once, when Robert's voice broke with emotion, she pressed her forehead harder against the glass, as if trying to comfort him through the barrier. Sarah watched them together, tears streaming down her face. She'd known her father loved his work. She'd heard the stories her entire life. Binti's name had been spoken at their dinner table for 40 years, but she'd thought they were just stories. Exaggerations, maybe, or the rose-tinted memories of a man who'd dedicated his life to animals. But seeing this, seeing the depth of connection between man and gorilla, seeing Binti cry, seeing her father pour out his heart to someone who couldn't answer in words but understood everything, took her breath away. This wasn't just to keep her in his charge. This was love. Pure, real, cross-species love. "Dad," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her. "I understand now. I finally understand." Finally, as the late afternoon sun began to slant through the windows, Robert sagged in his wheelchair. The effort of sitting upright, of maintaining focus, had exhausted him. "Dad," Sarah said gently. "We should probably, just a few more minutes," Robert said. "Please." Sarah looked at Dr. Martinez, who nodded. Robert turned back to Binti, his hand still pressed to the glass. "I have to go now," he told her, "and I don't think I'll be able to come back. Do you understand?" Binti's eyes seemed to hold an answer. "You were the first gorilla I ever cared for," Robert said. "And you taught me everything about what it means to truly connect with another being. You made me a better person, Binti. Thank you for that." Binti's hand slid down the glass slightly, as if reaching for him. "I love you," Robert whispered. "I've always loved you, and I always will." Then, slowly, Robert pulled his hand back from the glass. Binti's palm stayed pressed to the barrier, her fingers splayed wide. Sarah began to wheel her father back, but Robert raised his hand. "Wait," he said. "Look." Binti had moved her hand down to the bottom edge of the glass. She was reaching under the barrier. There was a small gap where the glass didn't quite meet the floor. Her fingers stretched through that gap, reaching out into the observation area. Robert understood immediately. "Lower me," he said urgently to Sarah. "Get me closer to the floor." Sarah and Dr. Martinez helped Robert lean down as he reached toward Binti's outstretched fingers. Their hands met, separated by glass for 2 hours, now finally touching, skin to skin, after 10 years apart. Binti's fingers curled gently around Robert's, holding but not grasping, tender but firm. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Robert gently pulled his hand back. "Goodbye, sweet girl," he said. "Be good." Be happy, live well. Binti withdrew her hand slowly. She sat up, pressed both palms to the glass one final time, and then, with what looked like enormous effort, she turned and walked away, back toward the other gorillas. She didn't look back. Robert watched her go, tears streaming freely down his face. "She understood," he said. "She knew I was saying goodbye." They wheeled Robert out of the observation area and back to the medical van. He slept during most of the journey home, exhausted by the visit but peaceful in a way Sarah hadn't seen in months. 3 days later, Robert Chen died in his sleep. Peaceful, fulfilled. Sarah returned to the sanctuary a week after the funeral. She brought a small bronze plaque that she installed beside the viewing window. "How is Binti?" she asked Dr. Martinez quietly. "She goes to the glass every morning, right where your father sat, stays for 10 minutes, then goes about her day." "Does she understand he's gone?" "I think she understood that day was goodbye. That's why she turned away." Sarah looked through the window. Binti sat with a young gorilla, patiently, teaching through gentle grooming, the same care Robert had once shown her. "He's the reason she knows how," Dr. Martinez said softly. And in the habitat, Binti looked up briefly, met Sarah's eyes, then returned to her work. The bond remained, always. Did you enjoy this story? If you had raised an animal from infancy and decades later were dying, would you want to see them one final time, yes or no? Let us know in the comments below. If you like the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.